the last thing to ever happen in the universe. Even just forming the words feels impossible, because a last assumes there's nothing after, and nothing is hard to hold in your mind. What could it be? A final flash of light from a dying star, billions of years from now? Or something so drawn out that no clock could measure it, no witness could survive to record it? Maybe the universe doesn't end in fire or in ice, but in an exhaustion so deep that even change itself ceases. And then what remains? An eternal stillness, or a silence so vast it erases the very meaning of silence. To even ask the question is to step into strangeness, because you've only ever known motion, transformation, beginnings and endings layered upon one another like waves breaking on a shore. The idea of an end to all endings, it slips through your fingers the moment you try to grasp it. But let's try anyway. Let's trace the line of the universe not just forward in time, but outward to its farthest possible horizon. Let's follow it through the heat of stars, through the collapse of galaxies, through stretches of darkness so long they might as well be forever, until we reach the moment where something happens for the very last time. Think about it. Right now somewhere a star is exploding. The light of its death will travel for millions of years before anyone ever sees it. Elsewhere stars are being born, collapsing clouds of dust igniting into brilliance. At the same time, the universe is expanding, galaxies drifting farther apart. And in your own body, countless atomic dances are playing out. Tiny motions of particles, vibrations of energy, interactions that in miniature echo the cosmos itself. The universe is not quiet. It hums with activity. It shifts, it breathes, it decays, and it renews. So when we ask about the very last thing, we are imagining the final flicker of this endless restlessness. The last heartbeat of existence. Is it fire? Imagine everything pulled back into itself, collapsing, until the universe shrinks to a point of unbearable density. A single, final moment of compression, heat, and violence. A death that looks like birth, the echo of the Big Bang in reverse. A last crushing pulse. Or is it ice? Imagine instead a slow fading. Stars burning out, galaxies drifting into isolation, black holes evaporating into faint whispers of radiation. The last spark somewhere sometime finally guttering out. Darkness swallowing light not with force but with patience. An end not with a bang but with a sigh. Both visions exist in the minds of scientists. Both are plausible shapes for the ending. And yet both raise the same unsettling truth. If there is a last thing, then even time itself must one day reach a horizon where forward no longer means anything. Pause for a moment. Picture yourself standing in that future. It's not really possible. You wouldn't be there, nothing would. But imagine anyway. Imagine waiting in the stillness, the infinite silence until the final event happens. A flicker, a ripple, a breath, and then never again. What would it mean for there to be no more next? No more unfolding, no more sequence, no more change? Is that even something we can conceive of? Because to exist at all is to be carried forward. You wake, you move, you think, you breathe, always with another moment ahead. The universe itself has been doing the same for nearly 14 billion years. But eventually it may stop. That is the heart of the question. Not just what will happen, but what it means for happening itself to end. Of course, you might say, how could anyone ever know? If it is the last thing, there will be no one to witness it. And if no one can witness, is it still an ending? A final sound with no ears to hear? A final light with no eyes to see? Strange, isn't it? The very idea of the universe's last moment makes us reach instinctively for human metaphors: sight, sound, breath, silence. But the truth is, it would go on without us. It already has for almost all of its history, and it will continue long after we're gone. Our questions, our fears, our attempts to make sense of it, they are specks against the enormity of time. And yet they matter, because even if we cannot witness the last thing, we can still imagine it. And imagination is its own form of witnessing. It allows us to stand, if only for a moment, at the edge of eternity and peer into the dark. So what is it then? What is the last thing to ever happen in the universe? A violent collapse? A slow drift into nothing? Or something stranger still? An ending we have no words for, no science yet to predict, no metaphor strong enough to hold. The question lingers, like a door left slightly open. You can't yet see through it. You can only sense the shape of what might be on the other side. But as we step deeper into this journey, we will follow that question further, through physics and paradox, through time scales that dwarf comprehension, through ideas that stretch the edges of reason. And maybe, just maybe, by the time we reach the far end of this path, we'll find not an answer, but a kind of peace in the ask. The question hangs there. The last thing to ever happen in the universe. It's not the kind of question you can resolve quickly. It pulls you further in, layer by layer, until you find yourself drifting, carried by the sheer weight of it. To imagine an ending, you first have to stretch your sense of time. Because the human mind lives in centuries, in lifetimes, in stories told across generations. 1,000 years feels ancient. 1,000,000 is hard to picture. 1,000,000,000 sits beyond comprehension. And yet, when we speak of the universe, we are forced into numbers that mock those scales. Not thousands of years, not millions, but trillions upon trillions. Durations so immense they make the rise and fall of civilizations look like sparks vanishing in the dark. Take stars, for instance. The ones we see shining above us tonight are not eternal. They are engines burning through their fuel. Some will live a few million years, others tens of billions, depending on their size. And in their lifetimes, they create light, heat, the very elements that make life possible. But eventually, even the most enduring star will fade. Its core will collapse, or it will swell into a red giant, or it will cool into a white dwarf. And then silence. Now imagine that multiplied across the cosmos. Every star that has ever burned will one day go dark. Every galaxy will lose its brilliance, its clusters of light extinguished one by one. The night sky, which now seems infinite, will gradually empty, first thinning, then dimming, until nothing shines at all. That's one way to begin the journey toward the last thing. Not with a collapse, not with fire, but with the slow erosion of brightness. A universe entering its twilight. But even the twilight is only the beginning, because stars are not the only players on the stage. Black holes wait in the wings, vast and patient. Born from collapsed stars, they linger, devouring anything that strays too close. Their gravity a trap even light cannot escape. For a long time, they dominate the universe, silent, invisible engines of destruction. And yet, even they are not eternal. Physicists tell us that black holes can evaporate. Not quickly, not in any scale that makes sense to us, but slowly, particle by particle, radiating energy into the void. It is a process so slow that even to speak of it is to admit our minds can't follow. Imagine waiting for a mountain to melt one grain at a time under the heat of the sun. Now stretch that patience across unimaginable epochs. That is the timescale of a black hole's death. And so the question deepens. If stars vanish and galaxies unravel, and black holes eventually fade into nothing, what remains? The answer may be particles, protons, neutrons, electrons, the smallest building blocks of matter. Perhaps they drift endlessly, scattered across an expanding universe, colder and thinner with every passing eon. Or perhaps even they decay, dissolving into radiation, leaving only a whisper of energy spread thin across eternity. Imagine that state. No stars, no galaxies, no planets. No black holes, no clusters, no bursts of light. Only an ocean of emptiness, scattered with faint traces of what once was. Motion slowed almost to stillness, interactions nearly extinguished. A vast desert of nothing stretching forever. And yet still not the last thing. Not yet, because even if the universe becomes empty, time keeps moving. And if time moves, then events can still unfold, even if they are unimaginably rare. A particle decays. A fluctuation occurs in the vacuum of space. A quantum event ripples through the void. Tiny things, yes, so tiny they seem invisible against the grand scale. But in a universe stripped of everything else, even the smallest flicker becomes the most important. A last note in a fading symphony. Think about that for a moment. The last event in the universe might not be spectacular. It might not be a cosmic explosion or a violent collapse. It might be quiet, so quiet that if there were anyone left to notice, they might not notice at all. Perhaps the last thing to ever happen is a single particle's decay, a transformation so small it would pass unnoticed in the present universe. But in the farthest reaches of time, where nothing else remains, that single decay becomes the final chapter. The book closing not with a roar, but with the faintest whisper. This is where the question begins to feel heavier. Because if the last thing is so small, so quiet, then the grandeur of everything, the stars, the galaxies, the beauty of life, leads only to that silence. And what does that say about us here and now? What does it mean to live in the early universe, when the cosmos is still alive with fire, compared to that frozen future? We live in the bright age. We walk beneath skies filled with stars. We witness galaxies still colliding, black holes still devouring, light still traveling across impossible distances. We are creatures of the universe's youth. One day, all of this vibrancy will be gone. But tonight, it is still here. And maybe that is part of the mystery. To wonder about the last thing is also to recognize how rare this moment is. We exist at a time when the universe is still awake, when there are still stories to tell, still heat and light, still the possibility of life. To know that it will one day end does not diminish the present. If anything, it sharpens it. It makes every star above you, every breath you take, feel like a gift borrowed from eternity. So the question remains open. What is the last thing to ever happen in the universe? Will it be the quiet collapse of a particle, the slow fading of black holes, or some stranger ending we cannot yet see? We are only beginning to trace the outline. The details are still hidden, still far ahead on the path. But with each step, we come closer to glimpsing the shape of the end. And in that glimpse, something begins to stir. A strange mixture of fear and wonder, because the last thing in the universe is not just about physics. It is also about meaning. And meaning is something we cannot measure with equations alone. The horizon is still far away, but we are walking toward it. Slowly, patiently. Carried forward by the question itself. The last thing to ever happen in the universe is not something you can point to easily. It's not written in the stars above or in the galaxies scattered like islands across the dark. It lives out there in a future so distant that even the word future feels flimsy, like paper dissolving in water. But the mind still reaches for it, because if there is an ending, then the entire story of the universe, the story of everything, leans toward that final page. And we are still at the beginning, somewhere in the prologue, wondering how it all unfolds. To understand where the universe is going, you have to imagine where it has been. A beginning is always tangled up with its ending. The Big Bang was not a sound, not an explosion in the usual sense, but a release, space itself unfolding, expanding from an origin point so small and dense it escapes imagination. 14 billion years later, the universe is still expanding, still cooling, still creating complexity from that first simple blaze. Everything you know is an echo of that beginning. The atoms in your body, the air you breathe, the light you see, they were born in the furnaces of stars, which themselves were born from the raw material unleashed in those first moments. The universe has been restless since the start, always changing, always moving forward. And so the idea of an ending, a final stillness, feels unnatural. It resists what you have come to expect from existence itself. But if the universe had a beginning, why not an ending too? Pause and let your mind try to stretch across the ages. From here, from now to then. It is not an easy journey, because the numbers balloon so quickly they blur into abstraction. Think of 1 billion years, 1,000,000,000 years. In that span, whole species rise and vanish, mountains form and crumble, galaxies drift into new shapes. Now multiply that by 1,000 again, and again, until the scale becomes so immense that our language collapses under its weight. Trillions upon trillions of years, durations that make the history of Earth look like a flicker of lightning. And still the universe keeps going, still expanding, still unfolding, but slower, colder, thinner. A kind of long exhale that never ends. Picture the far future skies. Tonight you see a scattering of stars, perhaps thousands if you look from a dark place. But in the deep future, the stars will go out one by one. The sky will grow sparse. Galaxies will drift so far apart that their light will never reach each other. An observer, if any could exist, would look up and see only darkness, unaware that other galaxies ever existed at all. The cosmos itself will seem empty. And yet, in that emptiness, time continues to march. Black holes, those ancient anchors of gravity, will still linger. They will swallow what remains, stretching matter into threads, consuming light and space itself. For unimaginable ages they will rule, but not forever. Hawking radiation, the slow leak of energy, will eventually undo even them. One by one, the great voids will shrink, dissolve, and vanish into faint whispers of heat. The universe will lose its last titans. What remains after that? A scattering of particles, perhaps protons drifting endlessly, perhaps even those decay, unraveling into simpler forms until nothing solid remains. The universe then becomes a sea of radiation, faint and uniform, spread so thin that it might as well be nothing at all. And maybe that is the ending. Not fire, not collapse, but a gentle fade. A universe that becomes so still, so empty, that the very idea of events ceases to make sense. A final silence, but silence itself raises questions, because in silence there is still the possibility of interruption. Even in the void, physics whispers of fluctuations, tiny quantum ripples, the universe still restless on scales beyond human sense. Could these tiny flickers create something new? A particle, a spark, a seed of order in the vast sea of chaos? And if so, does that mean the universe never truly ends, but cycles through endless rebirths, each one beginning from the ashes of the last? The thought is dizzying, because it suggests that the last thing might not be the last after all. It might be the bridge to another beginning, or it might be so strange, so unlike anything we know that our questions themselves cannot touch it. Stand with that thought. The last thing in the universe could be silence, or a flicker, or something utterly beyond imagining. The horizon is too far, the darkness too deep, for us to see clearly. But that is the point. The asking itself stretches us. It pulls the mind into places it has never been. There is a certain irony in all this. Here you are, alive in the universe's youth, asking about its death. A brief flicker of consciousness, staring billions of years ahead into a silence you will never touch. And yet the question feels urgent, intimate, as if it tells you something about life itself. Because endings, however distant, always reflect back onto beginnings. To ask about the last thing is also to ask, what is happening now in this moment and why does it matter? Perhaps the end of the universe is not a tragedy. Perhaps it is a reminder that nothing is guaranteed to last, that even the grandest of all things, the cosmos itself, is finite. And if that is true, then the weight of this moment, this sliver of brightness before the fade, grows heavier, more precious. So the last thing to ever happen in the universe is not just a scientific puzzle. It is a mirror held up to our own lives. Because we too have last things. A last heartbeat, a last breath, a last word. And though those endings feel impossibly far away while life burns brightly, they arrive all the same. The universe is not so different. It burns now. It breathes now. But one day it too will fall silent. And that silence, whether collapse or fade or something stranger, is the horizon we cannot escape. This is the end of the setup. The stage is built, the question framed, the vastness stretched before you. Ahead lies the unsettling truth. Much of what you believe about endings may not be true. Our intuitions about time, about decay, about forever, they break under the weight of the cosmos. And in the next step, those intuitions will be challenged. What you expect of the universe's last chapter may not match what physics has to say. The story is stranger, sharper, and far more unsettling than simple silence. The question remains, if not the quiet fade you imagine, then what? You imagine the end of the universe as silence, as darkness swallowing light, as a vast, empty stillness that goes on forever. That vision feels natural, almost inevitable. But the universe is rarely what intuition suggests. Time and again, physics has revealed truths that feel backward, twisted, impossible. And the end of the cosmos is no different. Your intuition says, the universe grows colder, emptier, quieter until nothing remains. But what if that isn't the full story? What if the last thing is not silence, but something stranger, something hidden in the laws of physics, something you would never expect? To begin breaking this intuition, consider time itself. You experience time as a steady flow, a river always moving forward. Seconds tick, minutes pass, hours accumulate, and you assume that this rhythm is universal, that it applies everywhere, always. But physics whispers a different truth. Time is not absolute. It bends with gravity, it stretches with speed, it curves with space itself. What feels steady here may feel entirely different elsewhere. And when you stretch time across the unfathomable future of the universe, it stops behaving like the neat, predictable thing you know. The last thing in the universe may happen so far ahead that the word, when, ceases to make sense. It may occur after such an abyss of time that even eternity feels too small a word. So already the idea of picturing the last event through human intuition falters. Your mind wants to place it on a clock, but there is no clock large enough. Another intuition, that decay always wins, that everything runs down, that entropy, the great drift toward disorder, will strip the universe of all structure until nothing remains. This is true in part. Entropy is relentless, but even entropy behaves in ways that twist the mind. In quantum physics, fluctuations can briefly reverse disorder, creating pockets of structure in a sea of chaos. Order appearing not by design but by chance. A starless void, and then, against all expectation, a flicker of something new. If the universe truly stretches on forever, then even the impossible becomes inevitable. Given infinite time, every fluctuation, every rare event, every tiny chance will occur. Not once, not twice, but infinitely. That means the last thing to ever happen in the universe may not be silence. It may not be the stillness of heat death. It may be a fluctuation so strange, so improbable, that it shatters the idea of an ending altogether. This is where intuition breaks hardest. because you want the story to move forward. A beginning, middle, end, clean arcs. But the cosmos is not bound to storytelling. It bends, loops, fractures. Its end might contain seeds of beginning, or its silence might not be silent at all. Consider black holes again. Intuition tells you they are eternal prisons. Nothing escapes, everything is lost. But Stephen Hawking overturned that intuition. Through subtle quantum effects at their edges, black holes leak radiation. Very, very slowly they evaporate. In time they vanish. The strongest prisons in the cosmos dissolve into nothing. Now stretch this lesson outward. If the most indestructible objects in the universe can evaporate, what else might intuition have wrong? Perhaps matter itself is not forever. Perhaps protons, the stable foundation of atoms, eventually decay. We have never observed it directly, but if true, then even the smallest particle of matter is temporary. Atoms dissolve, elements vanish, the very bricks of existence crumble. The universe you imagine, empty but enduring, may not endure at all. It may unravel completely until even emptiness is stripped bare. And even that is not the strangest twist. Physicists speak of false vacuums. Picture the fabric of reality as a landscape full of valleys and peaks. Right now, the universe rests in a valley, stable, seemingly permanent. But what if it isn't the deepest valley? What if there is a lower one, a more stable state hidden further down? If so, then at any moment, a bubble of true vacuum could appear, rewriting the laws of physics as it expands at the speed of light. The constants that govern reality, gravity, electromagnetism, the very bonds of atoms, could shift in an instant, and everything would be undone, not slowly, but immediately. No warning, no chance of survival. The universe, as you know it, gone in the blink of an eye. That too could be the last thing. Not silence, but a sudden erasure, as reality slides into a deeper valley of its own making. Here, intuition collapses, because you thought the end of the universe would be gradual, a slow fading. But physics allows for an ending that is sharp, catastrophic, without ceremony. The quiet fade you imagine may never arrive. Instead, a quantum event could erase everything long before the stars have burned out. So the horizon grows stranger. You began by picturing silence. Now you see possibilities of collapse, decay, fluctuation, erasure. Each one contradicts the simplicity of your first intuition. Each one is harder to hold, harder to accept, and yet each one is possible. The universe is not bound to your expectation. It moves according to laws that often look like riddles, puzzles wrapped in paradox. This is why the last thing to ever happen in the universe is not a question with one neat answer. It is a tangle of possibilities, each more bewildering than the last. A fading heat death, a sudden vacuum collapse, a final proton decay, or something stranger still. You cannot trust your instincts here. They were shaped for survival on a small planet, for days and seasons, for beginnings and endings that fit within a human life. But the cosmos is older, colder, stranger. Its endings do not bend to your expectations. They fracture them. So let the intuition break. Let the neat storylines dissolve. The universe does not owe you a tidy narrative. Its last thing may not resemble an ending at all. It may be something that erases the very idea of an ending. And now the question opens wider. If the last thing is not silence, not collapse, not even finality, then what is it? What shape does the universe's true horizon take? And more unsettling still, what does it mean for us here and now to live inside a cosmos whose future twists so far beyond understanding? You thought you were reaching toward an ending, a final curtain, a silence absolute. But already the ground is shifting. The more you follow the question, the more unstable it becomes. You reach for certainty, but the universe answers with paradox. It refuses to give you the plain satisfaction of closure. And that is the first great fracture of intuition. Maybe there is no last thing at all. Let's sit with that for a moment. The title itself, The Last Thing to Ever Happen in the Universe, implies a finality, a line drawn at the edge of time. But physics is not a storyteller. It does not care for finales. What feels like an ending from here may, from another vantage point, be only another turn in the spiral. Consider the heat death once more. You imagine a universe stretched thin, emptied of stars, stripped of energy, dark, silent, and you call that an end. But ask yourself, why call it an ending at all? If time continues to flow, if space continues to exist, then silence itself is still a state of being. A dead universe is still a universe. Nothing is still something. The absence of events is still paradoxically an event, the event of absence. So perhaps the last thing never arrives. Perhaps the universe simply lingers in an endless twilight, with no event significant enough to claim the title of last. Not a finale, but a limbo without conclusion. That thought unsettles you because it denies narrative. You want a final chord, a last word, a closing image. But the universe may not give you that. It may fade not into an ending, but into a forever without punctuation. And yet, even that intuition collapses under closer thought. Because in a universe stretched across infinite time, even the unlikely becomes inevitable. Quantum mechanics tells us the vacuum itself seethes with fluctuations. Particles blink into existence and vanish. Energy ripples unpredictably. If time is endless, then these flickers never stop. Even in silence, there will always be some disturbance, some noise. So how can there be a last thing if something always flickers again? The question dissolves into contradiction. An ending that never ends. A silence that is never completely silent. Here lies the second fracture of intuition. The end of everything may still contain endlessness. Picture it, a universe dark and cold, galaxies long dispersed, black holes gone. And yet, in the emptiness, random fluctuations spark. Not often, not predictably, but inevitably. One particle here, another there, a ripple of energy faint as a whisper. And given enough time, trillions upon trillions of years multiplied again and again, these fluctuations can, in theory, build structures. Particles clustering, patterns emerging, even by sheer chance, a brain. Yes, a brain. Physicists have given this idea a name, the Boltzmann brain. A conscious mind formed not from evolution, not from biology, but from random chance in the void. A flicker of thought floating in nothingness. It sounds absurd, and yet in an infinite timeline, the absurd becomes unavoidable. This breaks you further, because if consciousness itself can emerge from randomness, then what counts as the last thing? The decay of the last proton, or the birth of a lonely thought in the void? The line between ending and beginning blurs. The universe does not move neatly towards silence. It meanders into strangeness. It creates minds at the edge of nothing. It plays dice with infinity. And this forces another collapse of intuition. You thought of the universe as a grand arc. But maybe it is not an arc at all. Maybe it is a churn, a cycle, a restless chaos where last and first lose meaning. Think about how small your instinct for finality is. In your life, endings matter. The last page of a book, the last note of a song, the last breath of a loved one. These moments sear themselves into you because they are irreversible. And so you carry that instinct outward, projecting it onto the universe. But the universe is not bound by your instincts. It does not need finales. It may never allow them. The last thing you crave may not exist. And yet, paradoxically, it might. Because physics leaves room for sudden, catastrophic endings too. The false vacuum collapse. a bubble of new reality erasing the old. A quantum switch that ends the story not with a fade, but with a blade. Instantaneous, irreversible, the truest ending imaginable. So which is it? An endless silence that is never fully silent, or an abrupt annihilation, a cosmic guillotine falling without warning? Both defy intuition. One denies finality by stretching forever. The other denies continuity by cutting it off without ceremony. Both leave you unsettled because neither fits the narrative your mind wants to tell. And this is the heart of the broken intuition. The universe is not a story written for you. It does not promise an arc that makes sense, a resolution that feels satisfying. Its last thing may not look like an ending, or it may not allow you to see it at all. The paradox twists further when you realize the universe's ending is not just out there in the future. It is here too, in every decay, every transformation, every loss. The laws that will one day strip the cosmos bare are the same laws guiding the stars above you tonight. Entropy is already working. Decay is already happening. The seeds of the last thing are already sown. And so the last thing in the universe is not just a distant curiosity. It is present now, woven into the very fabric of existence. You are already living inside the process of the end. That is the hardest intuition of all to break, because you want to believe endings are far away, tucked safely into the unimaginable future. But the truth is, the end has already begun. It has been unfolding since the beginning. Every flicker of energy, every moment of decay is one more step on the path. And so you find yourself in a strange place. The last thing to ever happen in the universe might never come. Or it might arrive suddenly. It might be silence, or it might be catastrophe, or it might be something stranger, something beyond all imagining. Every possibility contradicts another. Every answer erodes the one before it. You wanted certainty. Instead, you are given a horizon of paradox. And maybe that is the point. The question cannot be answered neatly. It cannot be closed. It can only open wider, deeper, into places where intuition fails and imagination has to carry you further. You began this journey by asking a simple question: what is the last thing to ever happen in the universe? And somewhere inside you, you expected a clear answer, a moment you could picture, a final act you could hold in your mind like the last scene of a play. But now, the more you've followed the thread, the more it has unraveled. The more you've looked ahead, the less clear the horizon becomes. What you thought was an ending dissolves into paradox. You wanted a single destination, but the universe offers you forks, spirals, contradiction, and perhaps the hardest truth of all, it might not end in the way you think endings work. Let's push that further. Imagine eternity. Not eternity as poets speak of it, not love everlasting or the timelessness of beauty, but literal eternity. An endless future, stretching not just beyond billions of years, but beyond every number you could write down, beyond any counting system that could ever be invented. Forever. If the universe lasts forever, then endings themselves lose meaning. Because in infinity, nothing is final. Every last is followed by something else. Every silence contains the possibility of another flicker. Every void hides the chance of another fluctuation. And that means your question, the one that brought you here, may be unanswerable. Not because the answer is hidden, but because the very shape of the question is flawed. In an infinite universe, there is no last thing. There is only the endless churn of improbabilities, playing out forever. This is where the mind begins to fracture, because you are not built to think in infinity. You are built to think in arcs, beginnings, middles, ends. Infinity is not an arc. It is a flat horizon that never bends, and when you stare into it too long, your intuition collapses under its weight. But let's entertain another possibility. What if the universe is not infinite? What if time itself has a boundary, a wall, a place where it stops? That feels easier, more familiar, a story with a final page. And yet, even this comfort dissolves when you look closer. Because if time ends, what does that even mean? You can picture time flowing forward. You can picture a clock ticking second after second. But how do you picture a clock that simply stops? Not because it broke, not because it ran out of power, but because there are no more seconds to count. This too defies intuition. You can imagine silence. You can imagine nothingness. But can you imagine the end of time itself? A place where after no longer exists, where the very fabric that allows events to unfold has been switched off. Here the paradox sharpens. If time ends, then the universe ends with it. But if time continues, then the universe has no final moment. Either way, your instincts fail you. There is no clean answer, and yet humans have always searched for endings. Myths, religions, philosophies, they all tell stories of the last day, the final judgment, the closing of the world. This craving is ancient. It's written into the bones of our imagination. But physics tells a harsher truth. The universe may not give us the ending we want. It may give us none at all. Let's stretch the paradox even further. Suppose the universe does last forever, and suppose fluctuations, however rare, continue to happen. Then every configuration of matter, every arrangement of particles will eventually occur again. Not just once, but infinitely. That means you too. Your body, your thoughts, this very moment. Every detail of it could, by pure chance, reappear. Not because of destiny, not because of meaning, but because infinite time allows every possibility, over and over, endlessly. This is called eternal recurrence, a universe that does not end but repeats. You might live again, not once but countless times. And if that is true, then what is the last thing? If every moment returns, then no moment can be the final one. The question collapses into a loop, mocking your search for finality. Now ask yourself, what do you prefer? A universe that ends in silence once and for all? Or a universe that never ends, one that recycles every possibility, including yourself, over and over? Which is stranger? Which is more unbearable? Most people reach instinctively for finality, because the endless loop feels suffocating. The idea that nothing truly ends, that everything comes back again and again, erases the comfort of closure. But then again, silence forever is no comfort either. It is the suffocation of nothingness, the erasure of meaning by absence. And so you are caught between two impossibilities. An ending that isn't really an ending, or a forever that isn't really forever. This is the breaking point. This is where intuition gives way. Because no matter how you try to picture the last thing in the universe, the image slips. If you call it silence, physics whispers fluctuation. If you call it finality, physics whispers recurrence. If you call it collapse, physics whispers quantum chance. Every answer contradicts the one before it. You wanted the comfort of a simple ending. Instead, you are given a hall of mirrors. Every path leads to another reflection, another distortion, another paradox. And the more you chase them, the less solid the ground becomes. This is the lesson of the broken intuition. The universe is not obliged to fit your expectation. It is not obliged to make sense to a mind evolved on a single planet, in a narrow window of cosmic time. Its last thing, if such a phrase even makes sense, may not resemble anything you can picture. It may not even resemble an ending at all. So let the intuition shatter. Let the neat stories fall apart. You are left not with answers but with questions, not with closure but with openings, not with a final page but with pages scattered endlessly into the dark. And now, having broken what you thought you knew, we can begin the next step. Not to rebuild with certainty, there is none to be found, but to lay down evidence brick by brick until the horizon takes a sharper shape. The evidence will not comfort you, but it will guide you. It will show you the outlines of what may come, even if it denies you the satisfaction of a final answer. The setup gave you the stage. The broken intuition tore down the scenery. And now, in the evidence, we will walk among the ruins and start to see what might really lie at the end of all things. For now, sit with the silence that is not silence, the ending that is not ending, the forever that is not forever. Let the paradox echo in you. Let it unsettle, because only in that space of unease can the next truth begin to unfold. So far, you have been wandering through questions, drifting between silence and recurrence, collapse and fluctuation, eternity and erasure. But questions alone cannot carry us forever. At some point, you want to know what the science says, what evidence has been gathered, what theories stand on solid ground, what clues point to the shape of the last thing. This is where physics enters, not to resolve every paradox but to sharpen the possibilities. And the first piece of evidence is written into the very fabric of the cosmos: expansion. When astronomers peer into the night sky, they see galaxies fleeing from one another, not drifting, not floating casually, but racing outward, faster the farther they are. This discovery, first made by Edwin Hubble in the early 20th century, changed everything. Because if galaxies are rushing apart now, then they must have been closer in the past. And if you rewind far enough, you arrive at the Big Bang itself, the beginning of time and space. But expansion is not just about the past. It tells us about the future. For decades, scientists debated whether the universe would expand forever, or whether gravity would eventually pull everything back together in a big crunch. Our intuition once again preferred symmetry. If there was a bang, perhaps there should also be a crunch, a neat cycle of birth and death. But the evidence says otherwise. In the late 1990s, astronomers studying distant supernovae found something shocking. The expansion of the universe is not slowing down. It is speeding up. Galaxies are not just drifting apart. They are being pushed apart by some unknown force, something we call dark energy. This discovery reshaped our vision of the end. If expansion continues to accelerate, then the universe will not collapse. It will spread wider and wider, colder and colder, emptier and emptier, until everything is so far apart that nothing can touch. The big crunch gave way to a new vision: heat death, the long, slow fade into silence. This is the first piece of evidence in our stack. Cosmic expansion, driven by dark energy, points toward a universe that thins and fades, not one that collapses. But the evidence does not stop there. If the universe is expanding, then the energy within it is also changing. And here we meet the second great law that governs the cosmos, the second law of thermodynamics, entropy. You've heard the word. It is often described as disorder, the tendency of systems to move from order into chaos. But in physics, it has a sharper meaning. Entropy measures the number of ways a system can be arranged. And the second law tells us that entropy always increases. Ice melts, stars burn their fuel, galaxies spread apart, energy spreads thinner, more diffuse. The direction of time itself is bound to the arrow of entropy. This law, as far as we know, has no exceptions. And if entropy always increases, then the universe itself is sliding toward maximum disorder. Not in the sense of chaos, but in the sense of uniformity. A state where energy is evenly spread, where no more work can be done, where nothing can change. That is heat death, the ultimate triumph of entropy, the end of structure, the end of contrast, the end of events. So here is the second piece of evidence. The second law of thermodynamics insists that the universe is not only expanding, but also flattening, moving toward a state where nothing happens. But science, precise as it is, still holds surprises, because even entropy does not erase every possibility. The universe may head toward heat death, but along the way stranger events unfold. This is where we turn to black holes. For much of history, black holes were imagined as eternal, the ultimate sinks of matter and light. But in the 1970s, Stephen Hawking proposed something revolutionary. Black holes evaporate. Through the strange dance of quantum mechanics at their event horizons, black holes radiate particles. It is an effect so tiny it would take longer than the current age of the universe to matter. But given trillions upon trillions of years, even the mightiest black holes will shrink and vanish. This, too, is evidence, because it means the universe cannot cling to its titans forever. Even the densest, darkest objects are temporary, and so the universe becomes more fragile than you might have imagined. Stars fade, galaxies dissolve, black holes evaporate. Layer by layer, the cosmos sheds its grandeur. This is the third piece of evidence. Nothing is eternal, not even black holes. But the evidence stretches further still. What about matter itself? What about the particles that form the bones of existence? The protons, the neutrons, the electrons. For decades, physicists have debated whether protons decay. They seem stable, lasting far longer than the age of the universe. But many theories suggest they are not immortal. If protons eventually break down into lighter particles, then even matter itself will one day vanish. Atoms will dissolve. Planets, stars, dust, all of it will crumble into simpler forms until nothing solid remains. We have not yet observed this decay. The half-life of a proton, if it exists, would be staggeringly long, far longer than the current age of the universe. But the possibility remains, hanging like a shadow over our sense of permanence. Even the smallest building blocks may not last. This is the fourth piece of evidence. Matter may not be forever. Even the atoms that make up your body may not survive the longest reaches of time. Put these pieces together: expansion, entropy, evaporation, decay. They form a picture that is hard to ignore. A universe that thins, empties, unravels. Not in fire, but in cold. Not in violence, but in patience. And yet, even within this evidence, strangeness lingers. Because expansion itself is driven by a force we barely understand, dark energy. We know it exists because we see its effect, but we do not know what it is. And if dark energy changes, then the fate of the universe changes too. If it grows stronger, the expansion could tear galaxies, stars, even atoms apart in a final big rip. If it fades, gravity might one day win, pulling everything back into collapse. The evidence gives us direction, but it does not seal the future. And so we arrive at a delicate balance. On one hand, science points strongly toward heat death, a slow fading into stillness. On the other, it leaves the door open for stranger endings, collapse, rip, fluctuation. The evidence anchors us, but it does not close the question. Still, the stack grows. Each layer, expansion, entropy, evaporation, decay, presses us closer to a vision of the last thing. A vision not of fire, but of silence, not of collapse, but of dispersal. The universe losing its structure, its light, its possibility, until only emptiness remains. This is what the evidence suggests, but evidence is not certainty. And the closer we look, the more fragile even our strongest laws become. The next step then is to keep stacking, to gather more threads, more data, more glimpses of the end. Not to close the question, but to deepen it. Because the last thing in the universe is not a single fact. It is a horizon painted by many truths at once, layered into a picture both terrifying and beautiful. And so we walk forward, into the deeper evidence, into the details of entropy and time, decay and collapse, into the science that will not comfort us, but will at least light the path. The universe does not leave us in the dark entirely. We have laws, principles, equations, pieces of truth that guide us, even if they cannot yet reveal the whole horizon. And perhaps the most important of these is entropy. Entropy is not just a word in a textbook. It is the quiet force shaping everything. It is why stars burn out. It is why ice melts, why fire consumes, why structures crumble. It is why the past feels ordered and the future feels uncertain. Entropy is the deep current beneath time itself. Think of a glass of water and ice. At first, the cubes are sharp, structured, distinct, but given time, they melt. The cold spreads, the liquid evens out. What was once ordered becomes uniform. And once that happens, there is no going back. You never see the water freeze again on its own. This small example hides a cosmic truth. The universe, too, began with structure, hot, dense, full of gradients and contrasts, and slowly, like melting ice, it has been drifting toward uniformity, entropy rising step by step. The second law of thermodynamics insists on it. Entropy always increases. Not sometimes, not most of the time, always. It is the law that sets the direction of the cosmos. It is the arrow of time itself. And so, when we ask about the last thing to happen, entropy is unavoidable. Because the last thing, whatever it is, must happen in a universe dominated by entropy's rule. It must happen in the twilight of order, when differences have faded, when gradients have flattened, when the cosmos is nearly uniform. What does that look like? First, stars vanish, their fuel exhausted, their light extinguished. Galaxies grow dark, one star at a time, until only embers remain. Then black holes evaporate, surrendering their mass to radiation. Entropy does not rush. It waits, it erodes, it levels. And when even the black holes are gone, the universe is left with scattered particles and radiation, spread thin across an expanding void. This is heat death, not fire, not collapse, but exhaustion. The cosmos reaching maximum entropy, a state where no further work can be done. No engines can run, no stars can shine, no events can unfold, because events require difference, hot and cold, full and empty, structured and unstructured. Without difference, nothing happens. The last thing in such a universe might be the final evening out of energy, the last subtle decay into uniformity. A moment not of drama, but of completion. The melting ice reaching perfect equilibrium. But entropy is more slippery than it first appears. Because while it always increases overall, local decreases are possible. You see this every day in life itself. Your body, your thoughts, your very existence are pockets of order carved from disorder. The earth absorbs energy from the sun, channels it into complexity, into growth, into structure. Life flourishes not in defiance of entropy, but because of it. By creating order here, we accelerate disorder elsewhere. Entropy wins overall, but it allows for local exceptions along the way. And this raises a strange question. Could even the far future universe, drifting toward heat death, experience local fluctuations of order? Physics says yes. In an infinite stretch of time, rare fluctuations become inevitable. Order can emerge briefly, against the backdrop of entropy, before dissolving again. The chance is vanishingly small, but eternity leaves room for vanishingly small chances to play out. Not once, but endlessly. This means that even at maximum entropy, the universe may never be truly still. Tiny fluctuations, brief pockets of order, strange ripples of improbability, all of these can and will occur given enough time. So what then is the last thing? The final event before silence, or the silence itself, forever punctured by occasional noise. Entropy points us toward heat death, but quantum physics whispers of exceptions, flickers in the void. It is a tension you cannot resolve. Entropy demands stillness, but chance allows flicker. One says the end is final, the other says endings are illusions. The evidence grows more unsettling when you add time itself to the equation, because entropy is not only the measure of disorder, it is also the reason you know which way time flows. You remember the past, but not the future, because entropy was lower then and higher now. Your memory, your history, your sense of before and after, all of it is tied to entropy's climb. So if entropy reaches its maximum, if the universe flattens into uniformity, what happens to time? Does it still flow when there is no difference left to mark change? Does before and after still mean anything when nothing distinguishes one moment from the next? This is not a poetic question. It is a scientific one, and it remains unanswered. If the arrow of time is bound to entropy, then in a heat-dead universe, time itself may dissolve, not because it ended, but because it ceased to have meaning. A flat, unchanging eternity where time is indistinguishable from nothing. That could be the last thing to happen, not a flare of energy, not a collapse of matter, but the quiet erasure of time itself, the final breath of difference, leaving only a stillness where last no longer applies. And yet, even here, evidence complicates the picture, because the expansion of the universe is not just continuing, it is accelerating. Driven by dark energy, galaxies rush apart faster and faster. If this acceleration grows unchecked, the universe may not drift into heat death at all. Instead, it may tear itself apart. In this vision called the Big Rip, galaxies are pulled apart, then stars, then planets, then atoms. Even the fabric of space-time itself is stretched until it unravels. The last thing in that universe is not silence, but tearing, the annihilation of structure itself. Not gradually, but violently. Here again, evidence pulls in two directions. Heat death, the patient fade, backed by entropy and expansion. Or Big Rip, the violent tearing, whispered by the uncertainty of dark energy. Both consistent with what we know. Both possible futures. And behind them lurks another possibility, collapse. If dark energy changes sign, if the acceleration reverses, then gravity could take over. Galaxies could slow, halt, fall inward. The universe could end not in dispersal, but in compression, a big crunch, an implosion back into density. It is less likely, given current evidence, but not impossible. The cosmos could still surprise us. The horizon could still fold backward into itself. So the evidence stacks. Expansion tells us the universe moves outward. Entropy tells us order dissolves into uniformity. Black holes tell us even the mightiest structures evaporate. Quantum theory tells us matter itself may not last. And dark energy tells us the expansion could lead to heat death, or rip, or collapse, depending on its fate. This is where the science leaves us, with a narrowing of possibilities but not a closure. The evidence builds a frame, but the picture inside is still shifting. Heat death, big rip, big crunch, or something stranger. Each is written into the laws we know and into the gaps where knowledge falters. And so the stack grows taller, heavier, pressing against the question, what is the last thing to ever happen in the universe? Perhaps the last star fades. Perhaps the last proton decays. Perhaps the last ripple of space-time unravels. Perhaps the last moment is not silence, but tearing or collapse or fluctuation. The evidence does not choose. It only narrows. It only shows us the corridors we may walk, without revealing which door waits at the end. And that is where we stand now, on a tower of evidence, gazing outward at a horizon that still refuses to settle. Each law sharpens the view. Each discovery adds weight. But the last thing in the universe remains just beyond reach, like a star receding faster than light. The tower of evidence rises higher. Expansion, entropy, the evaporation of black holes, the possible decay of matter. Each piece reshapes the horizon, narrowing the futures we can imagine. But the stack is not finished. There are still darker, stranger truths to place upon it. And the next comes from the most enigmatic objects in the cosmos, black holes. You already know what they are. Collapses of stars, regions where gravity grows so fierce that not even light can escape. From the outside, they appear as voids, as absences. But in truth, they are not empty. They are packed with information, and the way they live and die may hold the key to the universe's fate. For much of the 20th century, black holes were thought eternal. Once something fell inside, it was gone forever, and the black hole itself would endure indefinitely, a dark monument to finality. But then came Stephen Hawking. In the 1970s, combining quantum theory with the geometry of space-time, he discovered something astonishing. Black holes radiate. Not much, not quickly, but steadily. Quantum effects near the event horizon cause pairs of particles to form, with one escaping, the other falling inward. The escape carries away energy, and over unimaginable stretches of time that energy adds up. Black holes evaporate. The largest may take 1067 years or more to vanish. But they do vanish. Even the greatest prisons in the universe cannot last forever. This is not speculation. It is theory grounded in quantum mechanics, in relativity, in the mathematics that govern reality. Hawking radiation is now one of the cornerstones of physics, even if we have not yet observed it directly. And its consequences ripple outward. Because if even black holes fade, then permanence itself is an illusion. There is no eternal structure in the cosmos. Not stars, not galaxies, not black holes. Everything is temporary. This is the fifth piece of evidence. The evaporation of black holes proves that nothing is forever. But the picture sharpens further when we consider matter itself. You are built of protons, neutrons, and electrons. Protons form the backbone, stable and enduring. Every atom of hydrogen, every element heavier than helium, depends on the proton's stubborn resistance to decay. Without it, the universe would dissolve in moments. And yet, physics suggests even protons may not last. Grand unified theories, attempts to merge the forces of nature into a single framework, predict that protons are unstable. Their half-life would be unimaginably long, perhaps 1034 years, perhaps more, but not infinite. In this vision, every atom is temporary. Every structure, every planet, every cell, destined to crumble not into dust, but into radiation. We have searched for proton decay in vast underground detectors, watching for the faintest flickers of collapse. So far, none has been observed, but the absence does not erase the possibility. It only stretches the timeline. And so, physicists continue to suspect that even the most stable particle of matter may one day fall apart. This is the sixth piece of evidence. Matter itself may not be immortal. If protons decay, then the very bones of the universe will dissolve into nothing. Already the horizon grows darker, stars gone, black holes evaporated, matter itself unraveling, entropy surging toward maximum. But the evidence does not end there. Because beneath particles and forces, beneath stars and galaxies, there lies the quantum field. Quantum field theory tells us that every particle, every interaction, emerges from deeper fields that pervade all of space. Electrons arise from the electron field, photons from the electromagnetic field, and so on for all the particles you know. These fields are not empty. Even in vacuum, even in silence, they hum with fluctuations. Energy ripples unpredictably. Particles appear and vanish. The void is restless, alive with possibility, and this restlessness may hold the power to undo the universe itself. Physicists speak of vacuum stability. Right now, the universe rests in a false vacuum, a valley of energy that feels stable but may not be the deepest. If there is a lower valley, then the vacuum we live in is temporary. At any moment, a bubble of true vacuum could form, expanding at the speed of light, rewriting the laws of physics as it spreads. The constants of nature, gravity, electromagnetism, the nuclear forces, could shift. Atoms would dissolve, chemistry would vanish. The universe itself would be destroyed, not slowly but instantly. This is not a wild fantasy. Calculations suggest it is possible, depending on the exact mass of the Higgs boson, the particle discovered in 2012. The data hints that our universe may indeed be metastable, balanced precariously, waiting for collapse. It might not happen for trillions of years. Or it could happen tomorrow. The evidence does not offer a timeline. It only warns the vacuum may not be safe. This is the seventh piece of evidence. The laws of physics themselves may one day collapse. And now, when you step back, the stack towers above you. Expansion tells us the universe is growing colder, thinner, emptier. Entropy tells us order will dissolve, energy will spread, time itself may falter. Black holes tell us even the densest structures will vanish. Protons whisper that matter itself may unravel. Quantum fields remind us that the very fabric of reality may collapse. Each piece on its own is staggering. Together, they paint a picture of impermanence, of a cosmos that refuses to last. So what is the last thing to ever happen in the universe? Perhaps the evaporation of the final black hole, releasing its last wisp of energy into silence. Perhaps the decay of the final proton, the unraveling of the final atom. Perhaps the collapse of the false vacuum, rewriting the laws of physics in an instant. Or perhaps none of these, perhaps something stranger still, something hidden in the equations we have not yet discovered. The evidence cannot decide, but it sharpens the question. It shows you the boundaries of what is possible. It points toward endings that are not endings, silences that are not silent, catastrophes that arrive without warning. And still, you feel the pull of the question, because none of this feels final. Not yet. You crave the shape of the very last thing, the closing event, the true horizon. But evidence is not resolution. Evidence is scaffolding. It builds the structure of possibility, but it does not hang the final curtain. To glimpse that curtain, we must stack even higher. We must look not just at entropy and fields, but at the deep interplay of physics itself, relativity against quantum mechanics, the expansion of space against the fabric of time. Only then will the outline of the last thing grow sharper. Only then will we see what may truly lie at the end of everything. The evidence has been stacking, one piece atop another, until the tower looms so high it begins to blur against the sky. Expansion, entropy, evaporation, decay, collapse of the vacuum. Each law, each theory, each discovery pushes us closer to the same horizon. A universe that does not last. A universe that erases itself, patiently or violently, until only silence remains. But evidence is never just cold fact. It reshapes the imagination. It changes what you can and cannot believe. It builds a scaffolding inside your mind, a structure within which the end of everything must be housed. And so let's climb this tower of evidence one more time, brick by brick, and see what it really shows us. Start with expansion. The galaxies are running. The farther they are, the faster they flee. Not because they are moving through space, but because space itself is stretching beneath them. This discovery, Hubble's law, was the first whisper that the universe has a history, a beginning, and therefore a future. If the stretching continues, the universe must grow colder. Matter thins. Radiation weakens, distances widen until stars no longer see each other. And if the stretching accelerates forever, driven by dark energy, then the horizon of visibility shrinks. Galaxies vanish not because they collapse, but because their light can never reach us again. A future of isolation, each island alone in the sea. This is the first brick. an outward rush that promises emptiness. Now entropy, the second law, the cosmic guarantee. Energy always spreads, order always dissolves, differences always fade. It is entropy that powers the stars, entropy that drives evolution, entropy that makes time feel like it flows. Without entropy, the past and the future would be indistinguishable. Everything would be still, frozen, unchanging. But entropy does not rest. It climbs and climbs, step by step, until one day it reaches its peak. And at that peak maximum entropy, nothing else can happen. No more gradients. No more engines. No more events. This is the second brick. A universe sliding inevitably toward stillness. Next, black holes. For decades they were imagined as eternal, silent tombs of matter and light. But Hawking's insight overturned that vision. Even black holes blade. Even they cannot hold their form forever. Given enough time, they vanish. This revelation is more than just a detail. It is proof that the universe leaves no monuments. Not even the most indestructible structures escape. Everything evaporates. Everything goes. This is the third brick. The death of permanence itself. Then matter. The protons, the skeleton of atoms, the stable bricks from which everything is made. For years they seemed unbreakable. But grand unification suggests otherwise. Protons too may decay, dissolving into lighter particles, unraveling the very bones of matter. Imagine it, not stars collapsing, not galaxies dissolving, but matter itself undone. Atoms ceasing to exist. Structure falling not into rubble, but into nothing. This is the fourth brick. The dissolution of being. Finally, the vacuum. Quantum fields humming beneath reality, restless even in silence. The universe may be metastable, balanced on a false floor. At any moment, a bubble of true vacuum could form, rewriting physics as it spreads. Gravity, electromagnetism, the bonds of matter, all shifted, all erased. The universe destroyed not by time, but by instability. And here the evidence turns sharpest. Because this ending would not take trillions of years. It would come instantly. A blade, not a fade. The last thing happening not in unimaginable ages, but possibly even now on the other side of the horizon, rushing toward us faster than light. This is the fifth brick. The fragility of reality itself. Now step back and look at the tower. Expansion leading to emptiness. Entropy leading to stillness. Black holes proving impermanence. Protons hinting at dissolution. The vacuum threatening erasure. The stack points in one direction. Endings everywhere. Endings slow, endings sudden, endings violent, endings quiet. But always endings. And yet when you stare long enough, another truth emerges. The tower is not a monument. It is a scaffolding. It shows shapes and outlines, but not the final image. Because each brick leaves cracks, uncertainties, questions that resist closure. Expansion tells us the universe is thinning, but dark energy remains a mystery. Entropy tells us the universe is flattening, but fluctuations complicate the picture. Black holes tell us nothing is eternal, but what happens to the information they contain is still debated. Protons may decay, or they may not. The vacuum may collapse, or it may not. The evidence is overwhelming, but not absolute. It narrows the possibilities, but it does not seal them. It guides, but it does not dictate. And so the last thing to happen in the universe remains uncertain. Not because we know nothing, but because we know too much. Too many paths, too many endings, all plausible, all strange, all humbling. Pause here. Let the evidence settle. Let the weight of it press into you. This is no longer a matter of imagination or metaphor. This is physics mathematics experiment. The tower is built of real stones, gathered from decades of observation. But evidence is never the end of the story. Because for every stack of proof, there is a counter-stack of doubt. For every brick of certainty, there is a crack of uncertainty. And physics is not a finished book. It is a manuscript still being written. That is where we must turn next. The counter case, the challenges, the places where evidence falters, or where alternative theories pry open new doors. The whispers that the end may not be silence or collapse or rip, but something stranger still. For now you stand atop the tower of evidence, looking outward. The sky above is vast. The horizon is dark. The future is haunted by silence and rupture. And yet you cannot help but feel the question stirring again. What if all this evidence is incomplete? What if the last thing in the universe is not what we think? What if the tower itself is built on shifting ground? The next step is to descend, to look at the cracks in the foundation, to question the bricks themselves. Only then can we see whether the last thing is silence or something we cannot yet name. The tower of evidence looks solid from a distance. Expansion, entropy, black hole evaporation, proton decay, vacuum collapse. The bricks stack neatly, one atop another, painting a future that seems unavoidable. But evidence is never absolute. Even the strongest tower has cracks, and when you step closer, you begin to see them. This is where the counter case begins, not to dismiss the evidence, but to remind you that physics is not finished, that the universe is stranger than even our best theories can capture, and that the last thing to happen may not follow the lines we have drawn. Start with entropy. The second law of thermodynamics seems invincible. Entropy always increases. The arrow of time is bound to its rise. But physics has taught us to be wary of absolutes. In the quantum world, fluctuations occur constantly. Particles pop into existence, vanish again. Energy ripples unpredictably. Order can appear briefly, even in the midst of disorder. And if the universe lasts long enough, even the impossible becomes inevitable. So what does entropy really mean in an infinite timeline? Does it flatten into perfect stillness? Or does it ripple forever, never truly reaching equilibrium? Heat death may not be a clean horizon, but a restless twilight, never fully silent. Already, the law that seemed like destiny begins to blur. Now look at black holes. Hawking radiation is elegant, persuasive, grounded in theory. But it has never been observed directly. We have never seen a black hole shrink, never watched one evaporate into nothing. And some physicists doubt the mechanism entirely. If black holes do not evaporate, then the story changes. They might endure forever, frozen monuments scattered across the void. The last things in the universe might not be flickers of radiation, but silent giants, holding their darkness until the end of time. Even if they do evaporate, another question lingers. What happens to the information inside? When a star collapses, when matter falls past the event horizon, does the information vanish? Hawking's work suggested yes, but later theories argue no. Some physicists claim the information must be preserved, encoded somehow in the radiation. Others claim it could be trapped in remnants that never fully evaporate. If information cannot be destroyed, then black hole evaporation may not be the ending we thought. It may not erase, it may only transform. And in that transformation lies another uncertainty about what last really means. Now turn to protons. For decades, scientists have searched for evidence of proton decay. They have built vast underground detectors, pools of water so large they could hold skyscrapers, waiting for the faintest flicker of decay. And yet nothing. The silence stretches on, and with each year, the lower limit of the proton's half-life grows longer. 10 to the 34 years, 10 to the 36, longer than the current age of the universe by unimaginable factors. Perhaps protons do not decay. Perhaps matter really is eternal. If so, then the universe may not unravel into radiation. It may persist in some skeletal form, matter scattered but unbroken, surviving even into the deepest ages. Here another crack opens in the tower. The fate of everything might depend on a decay we have never observed and may never confirm. Now return to the vacuum itself. The possibility of collapse is chilling, sudden, catastrophic, but it is only a possibility. We do not know whether our vacuum is false or true. The Higgs boson hints but does not decide. Calculations are uncertain, dependent on measurements still refining. And even if the vacuum is false, collapse is not inevitable. Quantum fluctuations may keep it stable indefinitely. The bubble may never form, or if it does, it may occur so far into the future that the distinction between never and unimaginably late dissolves. So even here, in the most dramatic of scenarios, uncertainty reigns. The blade that might fall instantly may never fall at all. And then there is dark energy, the great mystery driving expansion. We know it exists because we see its effects, but we do not know what it is. Is it a constant force, unchanging across time? Or does it evolve? Does it grow stronger, tearing the universe apart in a big rip? Does it fade, allowing gravity to slow expansion, perhaps even reverse it into a big crunch? The evidence points toward constancy, but the margins of error remain wide. And when dealing with the cosmos, wide margins stretch into futures so different they might as well be other universes entirely. Here again, the tower wavers. The expansion that seems destined for heat death may yet twist into collapse or rupture. Step back once more. The Tower of Evidence is impressive, but it is not a monument. It is scaffolding built on shifting ground. Every brick is solid, yet every brick hides a crack. Entropy may not settle. Black holes may not evaporate. Protons may not decay. The vacuum may be safe. Dark energy may change. And if even one of these uncertainties leans in another direction, the fate of the universe shifts with it. Heat death may give way to collapse. Collapse may give way to eternity. Eternity may give way to recurrence. The story reshuffles, and the last thing to ever happen is rewritten. But the counter case does not stop with physics. It stretches into philosophy, because even if the evidence were airtight, even if every law were certain, another question waits underneath. Is there such a thing as a last thing at all? If time stretches infinitely, then there is no final event, only an endless sequence. If the universe cycles, then every ending is only a beginning. If fluctuation is eternal, then silence is never absolute. The idea of a last is not scientific, it is narrative. It is the human desire for closure projected onto the cosmos. But the universe may not give us closure. It may refuse to end neatly. It may refuse to end at all. This is the essence of the counter case. The evidence for endings is strong, but the cracks are real, the uncertainties undeniable, and beneath it all a deeper challenge. The very idea of last may be an illusion, a story the mind tells itself in the face of infinity. So where does that leave you? Balanced between two visions, one in which the universe drifts towards silence, each possibility erased until only stillness remains, another in which endings never arrive, where the last thing is always followed by another, where closure itself dissolves. The evidence leans toward endings, the counter case whispers against them. Together they leave you suspended, staring at a horizon that bends in too many directions to follow. And that is where we turn next. To dive deeper into these cracks, to test the counter case further, to see how strong it truly is. Because the last thing in the universe is not just about physics, it is about uncertainty itself. And uncertainty here is infinite. The counter case grows stronger the longer you sit with it. Because once you begin to doubt the neatness of endings, you realize how many alternative visions exist. Visions where the universe does not collapse into silence once and for all, but instead loops, renews, or repeats itself in ways that resist closure. The evidence points toward heat death, collapse, or rip. But beneath the evidence, deeper stories whisper. Stories of cycles, of recurrence, of forever without finality. Let's begin with cycles. For centuries, philosophers and scientists alike imagined the cosmos as eternal, without beginning and without end. Even before modern physics, some thinkers proposed that the universe might go through infinite cycles of birth, growth, and death. A big bang followed by a big crunch, followed by another bang, another crunch endlessly. This is the vision of a cyclic universe. Instead of one long arc with a beginning and an end, time loops into itself. The collapse of one universe becomes the seed of the next. The last thing to ever happen is simultaneously the first thing to ever happen. For much of the 20th century, this idea seemed plausible. If gravity could slow expansion, perhaps the universe might stop, reverse, and collapse into another singularity. If so, then our universe would not be unique, but just one breath in an eternal rhythm. Inhale, exhale, repeat. But the discovery of accelerated expansion disrupted this vision. Dark energy pushes outward too strongly, too relentlessly, for collapse to seem likely. The evidence points away from cycles, and yet the idea refuses to die. Some theories suggest that even in an expanding universe, cycles could occur. Not cycles of matter collapsing, but cycles of fields and geometry, versus budding off one another through mechanisms we cannot yet see. String theory, with its extra dimensions, opens doors to such possibilities. Brain collisions, rebounds of hidden structures that could seed new universes after ours has faded. In this vision, there is no final event. Every death is only a prelude to rebirth. The last thing in one universe is the first in another. Now consider recurrence. Nietzsche once called it eternal recurrence, the idea that every moment repeats endlessly over and over, exactly as it is. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, but literally. At first, it sounds like philosophy, not physics. But then you consider infinity. If the universe lasts forever, and if the number of possible configurations of matter is finite, then every configuration must eventually repeat. Not once, not twice, infinitely. That means your life, every detail of it, every breath, every thought, could repeat endlessly across eternity. Not because of fate, but because infinite time guarantees infinite recurrence. The universe itself becomes a loop, not through collapse and rebirth, but through probability. This vision is unsettling, because if every moment repeats, then no moment is truly the last. Even the final event of the universe would, given enough time, occur again, and again, and again. What then does last mean, if the cycle of probability makes every event eternal? The question dissolves into absurdity. You cannot point to a final page when the book is written in circles. Now consider fluctuation. In heat death, the universe drifts into maximum entropy, flat and uniform. But even there, quantum mechanics does not rest. Fluctuations ripple through the void. Particles appear and vanish. Tiny bursts of order interrupt the silence. Given infinite time, those fluctuations can produce anything. Atoms, stars, galaxies, even minds. Physicists call them Boltzmann brains, conscious entities arising randomly from chaos, flickering briefly before dissolving again. Absurd, yes, but in infinite time, absurdity is not just possible. It is inevitable. And if fluctuations are inevitable, then endings are impossible. Because every silence is interrupted. Every last thing is followed by another thing. The last is never truly last. The counter case also reaches into the deepest layers of physics. Our theories, general relativity for the large, quantum mechanics for the small, do not yet fit together. They clash, they contradict, they leave gaps. And in those gaps, endings remain uncertain. We do not yet have a theory of quantum gravity, a single framework to unite the cosmos. Until we do, every vision of the end is provisional, incomplete, perhaps even misleading. The tower of evidence may be real, but it may not be final. It may be scaffolding for a building we have not yet learned how to construct. And so, every confident prediction of a last thing is haunted by doubt. The evidence is strong, but the cracks are deeper than they first appear. There is also the philosophical challenge. The very idea of a last assumes time is linear, flowing forward until it stops. But what if time itself is emergent, not fundamental? What if time is not a river, but a pattern, a byproduct of entropy and change? If so, then the end of time may not mean an ending at all, just the collapse of the pattern. A place where before and after lose meaning, where the very language of last dissolves. What if asking about the last thing is like asking about the edge of a circle? A question that feels natural but has no answer because the shape itself denies it. And here, perhaps, lies the deepest countercase of all. Maybe there is no last thing. Maybe the universe never stops, never concludes, never resolves. Not because it is eternal in the way we imagine, but because endings themselves are illusions, narratives imposed by human minds, trying to map beginnings and endings onto a cosmos that refuses both. This thought is strange, uncomfortable. You want closure. You want a horizon. But maybe the universe is not a story at all. Maybe it is a process without conclusion, a movement without destination, a pattern without finality. So where does this leave you? With two visions, the evidence stack, heavy with expansion, entropy, evaporation, decay, and the countercase full of cycles, recurrence, fluctuation, and doubt. One vision points to endings everywhere. The other points to no ending at all. And between them hangs the question, still unanswered, still restless, what is the last thing to ever happen in the universe? Perhaps it is silence, perhaps it is collapse, perhaps it is recurrence, forever looping. Perhaps it is nothing at all. But whichever vision you lean toward, the truth remains the same. The cosmos is stranger, vaster, more paradoxical than the human mind was built to hold. And in that strangeness, the last thing is not just an event. It is a mirror, reflecting back on what it means to live in a universe that may never give you closure. The counter case grows stranger the farther you follow it. Because once you loosen your grip on certainty, the possibilities multiply. You no longer walk on a straight road toward an ending. You wander in a forest of paths, each one splitting, each one twisting into horizons you cannot see. If the universe refuses to give you closure, perhaps that is because it is not alone. Perhaps what you call the universe is only one of many. And if that is true, then the very question of a last thing begins to dissolve. Start with the multiverse. It sounds like science fiction, but it emerges naturally from several serious theories. Inflationary cosmology, the idea that the early universe underwent a rapid burst of expansion, suggests that what we call our universe may be only one bubble in a vast froth. Each bubble could have its own physical laws, its own constants, its own story. Some bubbles may collapse quickly, others may last forever. Ours, balanced precariously, may be only a small part of a larger multiverse. If that is true, then the end of this universe is not the end of everything. It is only a local ending. The multiverse continues, bubbling endlessly, new universes forming as old ones fade. So the last thing in our universe, whether silence, collapse, or rupture, may not be the last thing in reality itself. It may be only a chapter in a book too vast for us to read. Now consider quantum mechanics. At its heart lies the principle of uncertainty. Particles do not have fixed positions or velocities until observed. They exist as probabilities, waves of possibility that collapse into definite outcomes only when measured. This has led some to interpret the universe itself as branching at every moment. Every possible outcome of every quantum event is realized, each in its own branch of reality. This is the many worlds interpretation. In it, the universe is not one line, but an infinite tree, forever splitting. If so, then endings become complicated, because in one branch, the universe may collapse. In another, it may fade. In another, it may rupture. Every possibility is realized somewhere. And that means no single, last thing defines reality. There are only countless endings, each as real as the next, none privileged above the others. The question itself begins to look fragile. Not what is the last thing, but which ending do you mean? But quantum theory stretches stranger still, because even the vacuum itself is not empty. It seethes with fluctuations, energy bubbling in and out of existence. Some physicists suggest that entire universes could emerge from these fluctuations, tiny bubbles of space-time, expanding into full-fledged realities, born from the quantum foam. If so, then the end of our universe might not be an end at all. It might be the beginning of another, sprouting from the ashes, and that universe might give birth to another, and another endlessly. Here, endings and beginnings collapse into each other. Every last thing is also a first thing. The horizon is not silence, but rebirth. But what if the multiverse is not real? What if there is only this universe, this timeline, this single stage? Even then, physics still resists closure, because not all theories of the cosmos point to entropy's slow fade. Some suggest that the arrow of time itself may reverse, that the universe could reach maximum entropy and then rebound, with time flowing backward, entropy decreasing. A strange mirror image, where the future looks like the past in reverse. In that vision, the last thing to ever happen is also the undoing of everything. Galaxies reform, stars reignite, atoms reassemble. Time itself loops back on itself, erasing the notion of last by folding the line into a circle. Unlikely, perhaps, but the counter case is not about likelihood. It is about possibility. And possibility here is vast. Philosophy has always walked beside physics in this territory, because when evidence thins, imagination fills the gaps. And philosophers have long asked whether the universe itself might be infinite not only in space, but in meaning. Perhaps there is no last thing, because there is no such thing as a single universe. Perhaps every possible universe exists, whether in bubbles, in branches, or in probabilities realized elsewhere. And if everything exists, then nothing can end absolutely. Every last is only a last here. This vision is unsettling, because it denies closure at the deepest level. It says you cannot have your final page. The book is endless, and you are reading only one of its countless chapters. But even stranger possibilities lurk. Some physicists have suggested that the universe itself is a simulation, not a metaphorical one, but a literal computational structure, created and sustained by something outside. If that were true, then the last thing to happen may not be cosmic at all. It may be technological. The simulation could be shut off. The program could end. The universe could vanish not through entropy or collapse, but through decision. This idea is speculative, controversial, and unprovable. And yet, it lingers in the background of modern thought, a reminder that we may not understand the ground beneath us. If the universe is a simulation, then the last thing is simply this: someone pulling the plug, an ending outside the laws of physics, beyond our comprehension, final in a way no collapse could be. So where does this leave you? With cycles, with recurrence, with multiverses and branches, with the possibility that endings are local, temporary, partial, with the possibility that endings themselves are illusions, replaced by infinite continuations. The counter case does not erase the evidence. It does not deny expansion, entropy, evaporation, decay, but it surrounds them with alternatives, with doubts, with visions that twist the story into something far less certain. You began with the expectation of silence. Now you are surrounded by noise, branches, cycles, rebirths, fluctuations, simulation. The horizon has grown more crowded, not less. And the question that once felt sharp, what is the last thing to ever happen in the universe, now feels slippery. Perhaps the universe itself will not give you an answer. Perhaps the act of asking forces you into contradictions the cosmos was never meant to resolve. The counter case does not end here. There are still stranger doors to open, still deeper cracks to explore. We have touched cycles and multiverses, but there are more radical ideas waiting. Ideas that suggest the very notion of the universe is too small, too narrow, too human. Ideas that pull the rug out from under everything, even the act of questioning itself. And so the path continues, not toward certainty, but toward strangeness, not toward closure, but toward wonder. Because perhaps the most unsettling truth of all is this: the last thing in the universe may not exist, and if it does, we may never be able to name it. The counter case has taken you through cycles, recurrences, multiverses, and branches. You have walked paths where endings dissolve into beginnings, where silence is punctured by fluctuation, where the very notion of a last thing loses meaning. But there are still deeper cracks to explore. Not just alternative endings, but challenges to the very foundation of what you think an ending is. Because maybe the question itself, what is the last thing to ever happen in the universe, is not only unanswerable, maybe it is built on an illusion. Begin with time. You move through it as though it flows, a river carrying you from one moment to the next. But physics has long suggested that time may not be fundamental. In Einstein's relativity, time bends, slows, stretches. It is not absolute. It is tied to space, forming a fabric that can curve and twist. And in quantum mechanics, time becomes even stranger. Equations can be written without it. Events unfold not in a strict sequence, but in probabilities. Some physicists argue that time is not a basic ingredient of the universe, but an emergent phenomenon, something that appears only at large scales, like temperature, like waves on water. If time is emergent, then endings are too, because an end requires time to exist. Without time, there is no before, no after, no last. The last thing in the universe may never come, because last itself may be nothing more than a construct of limited perception. This idea fractures intuition at its root. You want to believe time is real because you live inside its current. But the counter case whispers, perhaps there is no current at all. Only patterns, only relations, only a fabric that seems like time when viewed from within. And if that is true, then the universe may not have a last thing, because there may never have been a first thing either. Now turn to space. Relativity tells us that space can bend. Quantum theory suggests that space is not smooth, but grainy, bubbling with fluctuation. And holographic principles propose something even stranger, that space itself may not be fundamental, that the three-dimensional universe you experience may be a projection, encoded on a lower dimensional boundary. If the holographic principle is true, then reality itself is not what it seems. The stars, the galaxies, the vast distances, illusions of perspective like a hologram. And if the universe is a projection, then endings take on new meaning. Because what happens inside the projection may not be what happens at the boundary. The last thing here may not be the last thing there. It is like watching a movie on a screen. The film ends, the credits roll, but the projector continues, the reel spins on, another story waits to begin. If reality is holographic, then the universe's last thing may be only the end of the film, not the end of the reel. And then deeper still comes the idea of information. Physics has been moving steadily toward a radical claim that information, not matter, is the most fundamental element of reality. Every particle, every star, every galaxy can be described as information arranged in patterns. Even black holes, which seem to erase information forever, may not actually do so. The universe at its root may be an information system, unfolding through rules we only partially understand. If that is true, then the end of the universe is not the destruction of matter, but the transformation of information. And information, by its nature, cannot be destroyed. It can change form, it can scatter, it can hide, but it endures. So what then is the last thing? Perhaps there is no last thing. Perhaps there is only information endlessly rearranging itself, endlessly shifting states, never truly ceasing. Now imagine endings beyond endings. A universe that collapses into heat death may still fluctuate into new beginnings. A universe that suffers vacuum collapse may still give rise to new laws of physics, new forms of existence. A universe that tears itself apart may scatter into conditions that birth new realities. Every ending becomes a threshold, every threshold a crossing, every crossing the seed of something else. It is unsettling because you want resolution. You want the curtain to fall and the story to end. But the counter case refuses you. It insists that even endings may not end. And here you arrive at the most radical idea of all. What if the universe itself is not the thing that ends? What if what ends is only your way of perceiving it? To you, the cosmos is stars and galaxies, matter and energy, time and space. But what if all of these are emergent illusions? What if reality is structured in a way that transcends every category you know? If so, then asking what is the last thing is like asking what is the last wave on the ocean. There may be no answer because the ocean itself never ends. The counter case is not comforting. It does not give you certainty. It gives you vertigo. It pulls the ground out from under you. It says the last thing may not exist, not because the universe avoids endings, but because endings themselves are a human fiction. But there is wonder here too, because if the last thing is an illusion, then the cosmos is not a tragedy. It is not a story rushing towards silence. It is something deeper, stranger, beyond the reach of endings altogether. And so the counter case closes not with an answer, but with a question reversed. Not what is the last thing, but is there such a thing as a last thing at all? The evidence stack says yes, endings are inevitable. The counter case says no, endings are illusions or beginnings in disguise. And now, standing between these two visions, you are left suspended in paradox. It is time to move forward, not into certainty that will never come, but into synthesis, into a weaving of evidence and counter case, science and philosophy, silence and recurrence. A weaving that does not resolve the question, but transforms it. Because sometimes the most powerful way to answer a question is not to close it, but to open it wide. You have climbed the tower of evidence. You have wandered the cracks of the counter case. Now you stand between them, suspended over a horizon that refuses to settle. And here begins the weaving. Because both visions hold weight, the evidence insists on endings. Entropy rising, black holes evaporating, protons decaying, expansion thinning everything into silence. The counter case insists on uncertainty. Cycles, fluctuations, recurrences, multiverses, illusions of time and space. One voice says the universe must end. The other whispers that endings may not exist at all. So how do you hold both? How do you live in a cosmos that points towards silence and yet denies closure at the same time? Let's try. Begin again with entropy. The evidence says it will rise, flattening the cosmos into stillness. The countercase says fluctuations break the stillness, puncturing silence with chance. Put them together, and you see a universe not of clean finales, but of restless balance. Entropy climbs, yes, but never perfectly. Order fades, yes, but never completely. The end is not a line, but a horizon that flickers, always approaching, never fully arrived. Now look at black holes. The evidence says they evaporate, vanishing into radiation. The countercase says the information they hold may survive, encoded in ways we cannot yet see. Put them together and you see that nothing is permanent, but nothing is truly erased either. The universe transforms, but it does not forget. Endings are not destruction, but translation. Now protons. The evidence says they may decay, dissolving matter itself. The countercase says we have never observed it, that they may endure forever. Put them together, and you face not certainty, but humility. The smallest pieces of you, the bones of atoms, may last longer than stars, or they may not. The truth is unknown and perhaps unknowable. The last thing to ever happen may be the death of matter, or its persistence beyond comprehension. Now the vacuum. The evidence says collapse is possible, an instant erasure of everything. The countercase says it may never happen, that the vacuum may be stable for eternity. Put them together and you realize the universe is not safe, but neither is it doomed. It rests in tension, precarious yet enduring, fragile yet vast. The end could come tomorrow, or it may never come at all. And finally, expansion. The evidence says the universe will spread outward, thinning into heat death. The countercase says dark energy could change, that cycles or reversals could follow. Put them together and you see a cosmos still in motion, its fate undecided, its path open. The last thing may not be silence, but another transformation we cannot yet imagine. This is the beginning of synthesis. Not certainty, but coexistence. Not resolution, but weaving. The evidence narrows the field. The countercase stretches it wide again. Together they do not cancel but complement. One sharpens, the other softens. One grounds, the other expands. And in this weaving, something else emerges. A deeper question, hidden beneath the one you began with. You asked, what is the last thing to ever happen in the universe? But now you see that the question contains another. Why do you want to know? Because physics alone does not demand an answer to the last. It can describe probabilities, trajectories, possibilities, but the hunger for a last thing, for closure, for finality comes from you. From your need for stories, for beginnings and endings, for arcs that make sense. The universe may not be a story, but you are. You live in time. You move through beginnings and endings every day. The last breath of a moment, the last touch of a hand, the last page of a book, the last night of a life. Endings shape you. They define what matters. And so you project them outward, onto the cosmos itself. You ask what the last thing will be, not because the universe requires it, but because you do. This is the deeper synthesis. The universe may or may not have a last thing, but the question reveals something about you, that you crave closure, even when reality denies it. That you search for patterns, even when they dissolve into paradox. That you reach for finality, even in an infinite horizon. So how do you live with this paradox? Perhaps by embracing it. By allowing the evidence and the countercase to sit together, not as enemies, but as companions. One tells you the universe fades. The other tells you endings are illusion. Together they say, the cosmos is both fragile and endless, finite and infinite, dying and reborn. It is like holding two mirrors, facing each other, the reflections stretching into eternity. You cannot choose one. You cannot collapse them into a single image. But you can stand between them, watching the reflections multiply and find wonder in the endlessness of it. The last thing to ever happen in the universe may never be known. It may never exist. But the asking of the question does something. It stretches you. It pulls your mind beyond the scale of life, beyond the scale of stars, into horizons so vast they blur into mystery. It unsettles you, but it also enlarges you. It forces you to live with uncertainty, to accept paradox, to let go of closure. And perhaps that is the true gift of the question. Not an answer, but an opening. Not a resolution, but a widening of thought. The evidence and the counter case do not compete. They conspire. Together, they remind you that the universe is not yours to conclude. It is not a story written for your comfort. It is larger than endings, stranger than beginnings, more infinite than arcs can contain. So what is the last thing to ever happen in the universe? The evidence says the last black hole evaporates. The last proton decays. The last ripple fades into silence. The counter case says there is no last thing. The universe cycles, fluctuates, branches, rebirths. Endings are illusions. The synthesis says both are true. The universe may fade, but it may also recur. It may collapse, but it may also sprout new beginnings. It may end, but it may also deny endings altogether. The horizon contains all possibilities at once. And here you are, standing in the middle, looking out. Not at silence, not at recurrence, not at collapse, but at the paradox itself. And the paradox is beautiful, because it reflects you. You too are fragile and enduring, finite and infinite, mortal yet made of atoms that may outlast stars, temporary yet connected to laws that span eternity. The last thing in the universe may never be known, but you're asking of it, you're wondering, you're reaching. Those are their own last things, their own marks against time. And perhaps that is enough. You have reached the middle of the paradox. On one side, the weight of evidence, entropy, expansion, evaporation, decay. On the other, the counter case, cycles, recurrences, multiverses, illusions. And now you stand between them, holding both, trying to breathe in their tension. What does it mean to live in a universe that may end in silence, or may never end at all? What does it mean to wonder about the last thing, when your own life is full of last things already? Let's begin with endings close at hand. Think of the last time you saw someone you loved. You may not have known it was the last time. You may have walked away casually, not realizing the moment was closing forever behind you. And only later did you understand. The last smile, the last word, the last look. Human life is full of last things, most unnoticed. The last night you slept in a childhood room. The last time you played a certain game, or walked a certain street, or heard a certain voice. The last moment you were still young, though you didn't know it yet. We live surrounded by endings, but rarely do we recognize them when they arrive. Only in hindsight do they reveal themselves. And in this way, you are not so different from the universe itself, because perhaps the cosmos, too, is drifting toward its last things without realizing. Perhaps stars are already burning their last generation. Perhaps galaxies are already arranging themselves into their final configurations. Perhaps the very atoms of your body are already part of the long unraveling that will one day end in silence. The last thing in the universe may already be underway, just as the last moments of your own life are always already unfolding. But here's the strange part. Even knowing this, you live. You breathe. You find meaning in the fragile, the temporary, the soon to end. A sunset lasts only minutes, but you still watch it. A song lasts only moments, but you still listen. A life lasts only decades, but you still live it. Endings do not erase meaning, they give it shape. They carve boundaries that allow moments to matter. If everything lasted forever, perhaps nothing would. And so the last thing in the universe, whatever it may be, is not only a scientific question, it is a mirror held up to your own existence, a reminder that endings are not erasures but definitions. That finality, however unsettling, gives weight to what comes before. Now consider the other side of the paradox. What if there are no endings? What if the universe cycles, recurs, fluctuates endlessly? What if every moment returns, over and over, across infinite time? At first, this feels unbearable. If nothing ends, how can anything matter? If every moment repeats infinitely, what is the value of this one? But then turn the thought. If this moment repeats, then it is eternal. If your life happens infinitely many times, then it never truly vanishes. Every detail, the breath you are taking now, the thought you are holding, occurs not once but endlessly. You are stitched into eternity, not through permanence but through recurrence. Perhaps the absence of endings does not erase meaning. Perhaps it multiplies it. So you stand here between two visions. One where endings define everything. One where endings never arrive. And both are true in their own way. What does it mean to live in such a cosmos? It means living without certainty. It means accepting that closure may not exist. It means holding paradox without dissolving it. This is not easy. The mind craves resolution. It wants the story to finish, the arc to close, the horizon to be clear. But the universe is not a story, and perhaps your task is not to find closure, but to live without it. Think again of entropy. It climbs always. And yet within its climb, order blossoms, stars ignite, life emerges, consciousness reflects, entropy rises, but in rising, it allows beauty to exist along the way. Your life too is shaped by entropy. You are fragile, temporary, finite. And yet, in that fragility, beauty arises. Moments matter precisely because they do not last. You do not need eternity for meaning. You only need now. So perhaps the last thing in the universe does not diminish the present. Or perhaps it deepens it. To know that the cosmos may end or may never end makes this fleeting sliver of existence shine brighter. The synthesis grows stronger when you see yourself not as separate from the universe, but as part of it. The laws that will guide the cosmos to its horizon are the same laws guiding your body now. The entropy that will one day flatten galaxies is the same entropy that makes your life finite. The quantum fluctuations that may spark new universes are the same fluctuations humming in your atoms. You are not watching the universe from the outside. You are inside it, woven of it, inseparable from its fate. Whatever the last thing may be, you are already part of its unfolding. And here comes the most important thread of synthesis. The question of the last thing in the universe is also the question of the last thing in you. Your last breath, your last heartbeat, your last thought. Just as the cosmos will fade or recur or collapse, so will you. And just as the cosmos may deny closure, so may your own life. You may never know when the last thing arrives. You may never see it coming. It may already be happening right now. But does that diminish the present? Or does it make the present infinite in its weight? Think of it this way. If the universe ends in silence, then every sound before it matters more. If the universe ends in recurrence, then every moment is eternal. If the universe never ends, then every moment is stitched into an endless fabric. In every vision, the present is magnified. The synthesis does not erase paradox, it embraces it. It says the universe may end, or it may not. Both possibilities are true, both possibilities are beautiful, both possibilities reflect back onto your own fragile temporary life. So what is the last thing to ever happen in the universe? Science answers with endings, entropy, evaporation, decay. Philosophy answers with paradoxes, cycles, recurrences, illusions. The synthesis answers with this: it may not matter, because the asking of the question changes you more than the answer ever could. The universe may fade, it may recur, it may dissolve into silence or fracture into rebirth. But here you are, alive in its bright age, wondering. And the wonder itself is a kind of eternity. You are alive in the bright age of the cosmos. The galaxies still burn, the stars still sing, the night sky is still crowded with light. You walk beneath brilliance, and yet your mind stretches to the silence beyond it, to the horizon where light fades, where endings gather. And this is the paradox you now hold. The universe may end, or it may not. It may drift into stillness, or erupt into collapse, or loop into recurrence, or dissolve into something stranger still. The evidence insists on one story. The counter case insists on another. And the synthesis tells you both are true in different ways. So what do you do with this knowledge? What does it mean to carry the weight of the universe's uncertainty inside your own fragile life? Perhaps it means perspective. The human scale is small. You measure time in days, in years, in lifetimes. A century feels vast. 1,000 years feels unreachable. 1,000,000 becomes incomprehensible. And yet, the universe has already endured for over 13 billion years. Its possible futures stretch trillions upon trillions beyond that. Compared to such spans, your life is almost nothing. A blink, a flicker, a breath, but think again. Almost nothing, but not nothing. A flicker still lights the dark. A breath still disturbs the silence. Even the smallest mark against eternity still leaves a mark. Your life may be brief compared to the cosmos, but it is not meaningless. It is stitched into the same fabric, bound by the same laws, shaped by the same forces. Entropy shapes you. Quantum fluctuations hum within you. The same physics that will one day decide the fate of galaxies is already deciding the fate of your body, your mind, your every thought. You are temporary, but you are not separate. Perhaps it also means humility. The universe is larger than your categories, stranger than your expectations, freer than your stories. You want neat arcs, beginnings and endings, birth and death, prologue and finale. But the cosmos refuses neatness. It insists on paradox. It insists on uncertainty. It insists on scales of time and possibility that the human mind cannot fully hold. To live with this is to live humbly, to admit that you do not know and may never know, that the last thing to ever happen in the universe may remain forever beyond you, not because science fails, but because reality is too vast to be held in a single conclusion. And humility is not despair, it is reverence, to bow before the vastness, not in defeat but in awe. But perhaps most of all, it means reflection, because every vision of the universe's end reflects something back onto your own life. If the cosmos ends in silence, then you too will end in silence. And yet both you and the universe burn brightly now. Silence does not erase light. It only frames it. If the cosmos cycles endlessly, then you too may cycle, endlessly returning, endlessly repeating. And if that is true, then every moment is eternal, because it occurs again and again without end. If the cosmos branches into infinite possibilities, then you too branch, every decision spawning countless other versions of yourself. And if that is true, then endings are never absolute, because somewhere in some branch another path continues. If the cosmos is an illusion, a hologram, a projection, then you too are part of that projection. And if that is true, then endings may be nothing more than shifts in perspective, transformations rather than erasures. Every cosmic possibility is also a human mirror. Every ending of the universe is also an ending of you. And every countercase against endings is also a countercase against despair. So what is the synthesis truly? It is not the blending of physics and philosophy into one neat answer. It is the coexistence of both, side by side without resolution. It is the willingness to hold silence and recurrence, collapse and cycle without choosing one. It is the ability to let paradox be paradox. The universe may end. The universe may not end. Both are true, and the truth that matters most is this: you are here in the middle, alive in its brief brightness. Think of the stars again. Every star you see is already a past tense. The light reaching your eyes tonight left thousands, sometimes millions of years ago. You are always looking backward when you look at the night sky, and yet the stars shine for you still. Their light endures, even after they may have died. So too with endings. Even if the universe fades, its light is already here. Even if silence waits, brightness already exists. The last thing, whatever it may be, does not undo the present. It cannot. This is the quiet truth at the heart of synthesis. The end of everything does not erase the meaning of now. If anything, it gives it weight. You may never know the last thing in the universe. You may never witness it. You may never even know if it exists. But you can know this: you are alive in the bright age. You are alive while galaxies still burn, while black holes still grow, while matter still endures. You are alive before the silence, if silence comes. You are alive before the cycle, if cycles follow. You are alive before the unknown, whatever it may be. And that is enough. It is not eternity, but it is presence. It is not closure, but it is wonder. It is not the last thing, but it is your thing now. So the synthesis weaves itself into a final thread. The universe may have a last thing, or it may not. But your asking of it matters, because it reveals the strange gift of consciousness, the ability to imagine horizons beyond your own, to stretch thought across trillions of years, to place yourself inside the story of everything. And even if the story has no ending, the wonder of imagining it is its own form of eternity. You have walked the arc. You have built the tower of evidence. You have traced the cracks of the counter case. And you have stood in the middle, weaving both into one paradox. Now the synthesis reaches its close, not with resolution but with resonance. Because there is no neat answer. There is no single last thing. But there is something deeper, something that rises from the weaving itself. A vision of the universe and of your place within it that is richer than either evidence or countercase alone could give. So what do we see here at the edge of synthesis? We see a universe that is fragile and enduring at once. Fragile because stars burn out, galaxies thin, black holes vanish, matter may decay. Enduring because fluctuations never cease, information may be preserved, cycles may recur. Fragile because time may end. Enduring because time may be an illusion. We see a universe that does not give us closure, but gives us something else: vastness. A horizon that cannot be contained in one story. A paradox that refuses to shrink for our comfort. And within that vastness, we see ourselves. Temporary, yes. Finite, yes. But woven from the same laws, the same forces, the same fabric. Our lives are echoes of the universe's arc, reflections of its uncertainty, mirrors of its fragility. The last thing in the universe may remain forever unknown, but the asking of it connects us to the cosmos in ways that answers never could. Consider again the possibilities. If heat death comes, then the last thing is silence, the flattening of difference, the smoothing of all contrast. But silence is not absence. Silence is a form of presence, a canvas against which everything else once stood. And even in silence, fluctuations may ripple. Even in stillness, there may be whispers. If the big rip comes, then the last thing is tearing, the fabric of space unraveling, matter itself ripped apart. But tearing, too, is not absence. It is transformation. It is the passage of the universe into a new state, violent but real. If the big crunch comes, then the last thing is collapse, the reversal of expansion, the folding of space back into density. But collapse is not erasure. It is gathering. It is the universe returning to its seed, perhaps to bloom again. If vacuum collapse comes, then the last thing is suddenness, the rewriting of laws, the instant transformation of everything. But even then, what feels like an ending here may be a beginning elsewhere, under new rules, in new forms. And if none of these come, if the universe cycles, recurs, or fluctuates forever, then the last thing never arrives. And that, too, is a kind of truth. Each ending is also a continuation. Each last thing is also a threshold. The universe denies you finality, but offers you wonder instead. Think of your own life again. You are shaped by entropy. Your body grows, then weakens, then fades. Your moments rise, then fall, then vanish. But in that rise and fall is beauty. The fragility of life gives it weight. The finiteness of time gives it urgency. If you lived forever, perhaps nothing would matter. But because you do not, everything does. The same may be true of the universe. Perhaps the very possibility of endings gives the cosmos meaning. Perhaps the uncertainty of the last thing is not a flaw, but a gift, a way of ensuring that wonder never closes, that awe never settles into complacency. You do not need certainty to be moved. You do not need closure to feel meaning. You need only the horizon, vast and open, to remind you of your place within it. The synthesis also shows this. The question is larger than the answer. What is the last thing to ever happen in the universe? The evidence answers with endings. The counter case answers with continuations. The synthesis answers with this. The asking itself is the point. Because when you ask, you stretch. You step beyond your own scale. You place your brief life into a timeline of trillions of years, into a horizon that may never end. You let your mind breathe in infinity, even if only for a moment. And in that breath you are transformed, not because you know the answer, but because you ask the question. So let us leave the synthesis here in its proper place. The universe may end in silence, or it may not end at all. The last thing may be silence, collapse, recurrence, fluctuation, or nothing. It may be something stranger than anything we can imagine. But the true last thing, the one you can know now, is wonder itself. The wonder that you, a temporary being, can look at the night sky and ask about the fate of everything. The wonder that your brief spark of consciousness can stretch across eternity, can imagine endings and beginnings far beyond its own scale. The wonder that you exist at all, alive in the bright age, asking questions that may never be answered. That wonder is the true synthesis, and unlike the universe, it does not need an ending. Now the path begins to shift again. The synthesis has woven together evidence and counter-case, science and philosophy, silence and recurrence. But the story is not finished, because even synthesis cannot give you closure. It can only hold paradox. And so, as we move forward, we will enter the final phase, the open loop, the place where questions remain unanswered, where doors remain open, where the story never resolves. The place where the last thing in the universe remains always just beyond reach, forever receding, forever unsettled. That is where we are headed next. Not into answers, but into openings. Not into certainty, but into possibility. Because perhaps the last thing to ever happen in the universe is not something you can know. Perhaps the last thing is always the asking itself. The synthesis brought you here to a kind of balance, evidence stacked, counter-case stretched, and together they wove a paradox you could hold if only for a while. But now, as the story turns toward its closing arc, that balance begins to loosen. Because the truth is, the question cannot be closed. It was never meant to be. The last thing in the universe is not a fact waiting to be uncovered. It is a horizon, forever receding, forever unreachable, forever drawing you forward without letting you arrive. So let us step into that horizon. Let us walk into the open loop, where questions remain open, where answers dissolve into echoes, where certainty slips away like water through your hands. Think again of endings, heat, death, collapse, rip, recurrence, cycles, silence. Each is possible. Each carries its own weight, its own strangeness. But the deeper you look, the less final they feel. Because even if the universe ends in silence, you are left with the question, silence for whom? If no one is there to witness the last thing, can it be called last at all? And if the universe cycles endlessly, you are left with another question, who is it cycling for? If no consciousness bridges one cycle to the next, does recurrence matter? Does repetition mean anything if it is never remembered? Every answer opens another door. Every ending dissolves into more beginnings. Perhaps the last thing in the universe is not an event at all. Perhaps it is a perspective, an angle of looking, a way of naming what can never be named. You imagine the cosmos thinning into silence. You imagine it collapsing into fire. You imagine it fluctuating forever. But perhaps these are not predictions. Perhaps they are metaphors, ways for the human mind to grapple with something it cannot hold directly. The last thing may not be silence or collapse or recurrence. The last thing may be the impossibility of knowing. The last thing may be the horizon itself, forever receding. Think of standing at the shore of the ocean at night. The waves come in, the waves go out. You hear the rhythm, but you cannot count the last wave. There is no last wave. The ocean does not end where you want it to. It keeps going beyond your sight, beyond your measure. The universe may be like this. You want the final wave, but all you find is motion without end, recurrence without closure, possibility without resolution. The last thing may never arrive. The ocean may never stop. And yet the mind continues to ask, to press against the horizon, to wonder about silence, about collapse, about recurrence. The mind is restless, and in that restlessness it creates its own endings, its own stories, its own last things. Perhaps this is the true loop. The universe may not give you an ending, but you will always imagine one. The asking itself becomes eternal, the reaching itself becomes infinite. The last thing is always the question, never the answer. But let's stretch the loop wider still. Imagine that the universe does end. Silence, collapse, tearing, choose your vision. The last thing happens. The curtain falls. Everything stops. And now imagine what then? Does nothing follow? Does existence simply vanish, erased? Can you even picture that nothing? Not silence, not emptiness, not darkness, but nothing at all. Can your mind hold the absence of even absence? Or do you always imagine something after, another beginning, another horizon, another form of being? The mind refuses to end. Even when told of endings, it creates more. This is the deepest open loop. Even if the universe ends, your imagining never does. Think of time again. If the universe ends, time ends with it. But what does it mean for time to end? How can after not exist? How can there be no moment following the last? And if time does not end, if it cycles, recurs, or continues infinitely, then there is no last thing. Because last requires an end, and without an end there is no last. So the loop closes on itself. If time ends, you cannot picture it. If time does not end, then last dissolves. Either way, the horizon slips away. Perhaps this is the secret the universe has been whispering all along. There is no final page. The book is endless, and your task is not to read the end, but to marvel at the reading itself. Perhaps the universe is not a story with a beginning and an end. Perhaps it is a song without conclusion, a melody that stretches across eternity, never resolving, never closing, always drifting into new notes. You want the last chord, but the song may not give it. The song may only continue, softer and softer, quieter and quieter, until it feels like silence but is still music. And now, standing here in the open loop, you realize something. The universe has already given you its last thing. It has given it to you every night in the stars. It has given it to you every day, in the entropy of your body, in the fragility of your life. The last thing is always happening, always unfolding, always present. The death of stars is a rehearsal. The fall of galaxies is a rehearsal. The fragility of you is a rehearsal. The last thing is not far away. It is here. It has always been here. Every moment is both first and last. But we cannot stop here. Because the open loop does not allow closure. It insists on more doors, more horizons, more unanswered questions. So ask yourself, what if the universe is not the only stage? What if endings are only local, and beyond them something greater unfolds? What if the last thing to ever happen here is only the first thing to happen elsewhere? And if that is true, then what does last mean? Can it mean anything at all? This is where you are left. Not with answers, but with echoes. Not with closure, but with openings. The last thing in the universe may never come. Or it may already be happening. Or it may be happening everywhere, always, in every moment. And as the loop widens, so does your awe. Not because you have found the answer, but because you have seen the impossibility of finding it. Not because you have closed the story, but because the story refuses to close. The final step still remains. Part 20, the last chapter of this story. But even there, the loop will not close. It will widen further, leaving you suspended between silence and recurrence, between endings and beginnings, between certainty and wonder. Because the true last thing in the universe is not silence, or collapse, or tearing. The true last thing is the question itself, forever open, forever echoing, forever unresolved. You have walked far, through evidence stacked like stone, through counter cases that cracked the stones apart, through synthesis that tried to weave them back together. And now at the very end you stand in the open loop, where endings dissolve, where horizons recede, where the story refuses to close. This is the last chapter, but it is not a conclusion, because how can there be a conclusion when the very question is about the last thing that will ever happen in the universe? How can there be closure when closure itself is uncertain, perhaps impossible? So instead of answers, you are left with echoes. Instead of a final page, you are left with a widening of the book. The universe began in fire, or so the evidence says. A hot, dense point, an expansion, a spreading outward of energy and matter. And since then it has grown, cooled, stretched. Galaxies formed, stars burned, planets circled, life wondered. You are part of that expansion. You are part of that story. And so you ask, what comes at the end? The evidence offers silence, or collapse, or tearing, or sudden erasure. The counter case offers recurrence, cycles, continuations without end. And between them, the synthesis offers paradox, endings that are not endings, beginnings that are not beginnings, silence that is never silent. But none of these settle. None of them hold still. They slip through your hands, like sand, like light, like time itself. So what if the last thing to ever happen in the universe is not a fact to discover, but a mystery to inhabit? Not a point of closure, but a horizon to walk toward forever. This is the open loop. The universe may end in silence, but silence is never absolute. The universe may collapse, but collapse may lead to rebirth. The universe may tear, but tearing is also transformation. The universe may recur, but recurrence denies finality. The universe may never end at all, but even then, never is a word too small for infinity. Every possibility cancels another. Every ending opens into another beginning. The last thing is always postponed, always deferred, always slipping beyond reach. Think of it this way. You stand at night beneath the stars. Above you, galaxies drift outward. Stars are born, stars die. Light travels across billions of years to reach your eyes. You see the past in every flicker. You see billions of histories scattered across the sky. And yet, no matter how far you look, you never see the last thing. You never see silence. You never see collapse. You never see the end. The sky is always alive, always burning, always whispering. Even if the universe is moving towards silence, you will never stand beneath a sky that is truly empty. So too with the question. You can ask it, you can chase it, but you will never hold the answer. The horizon recedes faster than you can walk. Perhaps this is the truth. The last thing in the universe will never be seen. It will never be witnessed. It will never be known. If silence comes, no one will hear it. If collapse comes, no one will record it. If recurrence comes, no one will remember it. The last thing is not an event. It is an absence of events, and absence cannot be experienced. So you are left not with knowledge but with wonder. Not with answers, but with questions. Not with closure, but with awe. And maybe that is enough. Maybe the last thing to ever happen in the universe is not silence, or collapse, or recurrence, or tearing. Maybe the last thing is this, you alive now asking about it. Your brief spark of consciousness stretching across eternity, trying to imagine horizons you will never reach. Your fragile mind holding paradox, holding infinity, holding the weight of everything in its fleeting thoughts. Maybe the last thing is not out there, trillions of years away. Maybe it is here in you, in this very act of wandering. The open loop is not a failure of the story. It is the story, because the universe does not promise closure. It promises vastness. It promises mystery. It promises that the horizon will always be wider than your grasp. And in that promise there is beauty, because it means the question will never die. It will echo forever in every mind that wanders, in every star that burns, in every silence that deepens. So what is the last thing to ever happen in the universe? The evidence says one thing. The counter case says another. The synthesis says both. The open loop says you will never know. And that not knowing is its own kind of truth. The last thing is always ahead of you, always receding, always beyond the edge of sight. The last thing is not a fact. It is a horizon. It is the endless act of wandering. And so we end here, not with silence, not with collapse, not with recurrence, but with the loop left open. The question left unanswered. The horizon left wide. You will carry it with you. In your dreams, in your quiet moments, in the nights when you look at the stars and feel their distance pressing into you. The last thing in the universe will never be named, but the asking of it, the reaching for it, is infinite. And perhaps that is the truest last thing of all.